I really enjoyed you catching him on Twitter Spaces. I really enjoyed that. I listened to that whole thing because before that, you have this guy who's this, whiz kid who you listen to him talk. He has an answer for everything. He's so articulate. He's so knowledgeable. Like, I listened to previous interviews before he got busted. And then when you have him on, there's a lot of, I wasn't aware. I'm not sure. I'm not aware of that. I don't know. There was all this hemming and hawing and a lot of ums and ahs, and you just kept on him. It was amazing that first of all, it was amazing that he felt like he could do something like that. Like, why would he publicly communicate?
This is why it's so interesting to me to look at fraud. Like, this is why it fascinates me, as well as I think it's an important thing to expose. But like, I'm interested in the characters who perpetuate fraud because they're such interesting psychological case studies. Sam Bankman-Fried, you could probably write a whole book about the fact that this guy, he got away with lying so long and perpetuating this image of himself as this generous billionaire. He's sort of the next Warren Buffett, that when everything goes wrong, he thinks he can reestablish control because he's so smart. He is such a good liar that he's like, I can just lie my way out of it. So I think that's why he ultimately talked. His idea was, if I lied my way into it, I can sort of lie my way out of it. And this is what he did. So prior to this, I'd interviewed him twice before, and I had kind of gotten hamstrung with he's just so good at dodging stuff.
Did you interview him before the scandal?
No, not before the scandal.
So it's like as it was going down.
As it was going down, he goes on all these Twitter Spaces. He doesn't want to. He's doing interviews with everybody. I ask him, and he doesn't want to talk to me. So, but he's going on these Twitter Spaces. So I was tracking when he'd go on a Twitter Space, and I would contact the people ahead of time and said, hey, at the end when you're like ready for this thing to go down, because I know as soon as I get on, it's going to end pretty quickly after. I said, let me ask him some real hard questions. Because all these guys are like, Sam, we appreciate your transparency. All these kind of kissing up a little bit. But I was just like, somebody has to ask him some real questions. So I had 2 prior little Twitter Space interactions with him. And he kept getting away with the fact that he blamed all the wrongdoing of FTX on Alameda Research. And he said, I don't control Alameda Research. Even though he was the owner, he's no longer the CEO as of 2020. He hands it to this, a girl he actually had a relationship with, Caroline Ellison, right? And she supposedly controlled it. He said, she did everything. I don't have access to the book. Like, I basically knew nothing. So anytime you'd call him out on an issue, you'd say, where's the money? He goes, well, I don't know. It's gone. It's Alameda Research. Ask Alameda. So by the 3rd interview, I'd studied him and I said, okay, how do we get down to FTX's responsibility in this whole thing? And I kept coming back to, it was the terms of service that said, you cannot move, like when I deposit with you, you're not going to touch my money. And I said, Sam, if that's true, where's the money of all these people? There's no Ethereum left. There's no Bitcoin left. You don't have the real tokens anymore. You just have your sort of nonsense FTT tokens, the tokens you invented. And he said, there were some margin trading accounts. And I'm like, no, but there were people who didn't trade with margin. There were people who just put their money with you. And all they wanted was they wanted to store some Bitcoin with Tom Brady. They wanted to be alongside Tom Brady. So he's like, there was fungibility between wallets. And it's like, well, what's fungibility mean? It means whether you were a guy withdrawing who is this degenerate day trader, or you were a grandma who just put 1 Bitcoin on there, or, more likely the grandson, he treated all the accounts the same. So when everyone came running for the money, they just withdrew until nothing was left. And ultimately, because they had lost billions of dollars, it left billions of dollars in credit claims, basically. They didn't have the money. And so now it's trying to be sorted out by the guy who literally unraveled Enron. And he says, this lawyer goes, it's worse than Enron.
I watched the new CEO, talk about it.
Yeah.
About him trying
that's John Ray.
Yeah. Trying to unravel it. And it's amazing. It's amazing that things with this amount of money can get this far sideways before anyone knows what's going on.
This is the problem with offshore accounts and stuff. actually, his whole technique of shifting the blame like onto Alameda and like, I don't control Alameda. I've seen something very similar. I'm investigating this Ponzi scheme that's offshore. And like one of the first things the guy does is he controls it, but he renounces ownership. He goes, oh, I'm passing it off to some sham director. And he goes, I don't have anything to do. I don't know. Where's the money? I don't know. But he controls everything. And so it's like, this is the tactic of these offshore companies is like, you put the right people in charge who are going to take the fall, you resign, and then you blame it on them later when everything goes wrong. His problem, though, is Caroline Ellison flipped on him.
So she definitely flipped on him.
She was smart. Yeah. She cooperated. That her and I believe Gary Wang were big executives. They're cooperating. They pled guilty. They're cooperating with the feds. I mean, they did the smart thing, which is something like this happens, you shut up. You don't say anything.
Right.
And then you point at your boss. I mean, that's basically what they did. Oof. Which they for sure did stuff wrong, too. You do not get to that level and not know that things were wrong.
Well, reading her tweets about amphetamine use was pretty wild, too. The whole scene was wild. The fact that they were all living together and fucking each other in this giant penthouse, this $40 billion penthouse. The things, it's insane. It's really... I almost wish it wasn't a scam. I've said this before because I root for nerds to like be that successful that you're just completely living outside the norms of society, just fucking each other on amphetamines and making billions of dollars. Like it sounds like a great story if it wasn't illegitimate.
Yeah, ultimately that's the problem. Like Sam was just hopped up on amphetamines playing League of Legends while on investor calls. Like at the time that was seen as this charming, like genius thing.
On calls.
You could hear even actually, okay, so this is funny. They found his League of Legends account and during some of the calls after it was a fraud, you could hear him clicking in the background. Click, 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 click. He's playing League. Like they tracked his account. He's playing League while on calls about the failure of FTX.
Wow.
Just imagine the arrogance.
Is that arrogance or is it just pure addiction? I think, those multiplayer games, those, online role-playing games, that's what that is, right? It's like
I think it's is it a MOBA? I used to play like a variant of League, so I know it's fun, but it's not like fun to the point. Look, this guy's whole thing was like, I'm this effective altruist. I'm this guy who's going to maximize good in the world, and that was his reason for working all the time. I mean, that's the justification to be hopped up on amphetamines is like maximize productivity, maximize human happiness. You can't do that and then say, oops, I played a little too much of my video games and lost billions of dollars.